All right, hello everyone. We are currently in a new exhibition period at the Pump House, and one of our featured artists is David Williams, a watercolor artist from the Madison area. In his series, The Street Less Traveled, he showcases the unusual views of urban landscapes. Through edges and texture, Williams is able to show the true grittiness and nature of an authentic metropolis. So, hello, David, and thank you for joining me today. Why don't you start with you giving us a little bit of background on your artistic experience and past?
Well, I guess I was always into art when I was a kid and a teenager. I never had any formal training, and life intervenes, and I had regular jobs and a family and stuff like that. It's been more, say, the last dozen years that I've gotten back into art making. And about that same time is when I discovered watercolor and decided that was the medium that I really wanted to use.
Okay. Did you do any other sort of painting before you dove into watercolor, or has it always been your focus?
Before then, I was mainly using acrylic.
Okay.
But having 30-year-old acrylic paints and materials was a good time to having to upgrade anyway.
Hmm.
Like you say, sort of discovered watercolor, decided that I liked what it did, and switched over to that.
All right. Well, as we move into your work that is here at the Pump House right now, The Street Less Traveled, what was your overall inspiration for these pieces, and how did you move from more traditional, I guess, landscapes and things into the unseen or unrepresented locations in your artwork?
Well, when I first started painting in watercolors, of course, I did the traditional things. Everybody's doing florals, everybody's doing landscapes, and I still do those occasionally. But I found that I don't know, in some ways that wasn't quite as interesting. It's maybe rebelling a little bit to say, "Oh, everybody's doing that. What can I do?" And I think as you go forward in your artist journey, you start to find what you're drawn to. And so instead of saying, well, I've got to paint what other people are painting, I found that I became a little bit more attracted to both urban landscapes and crowd scenes.
Mhm.
And so once you get into that, then it became even more a nuance too. Instead of just painting, okay, let's paint the city hall and the fountain and all the uh, tourist spots that you find in the city. Again, I found I was drawn towards looking at alleys and fire hydrants and things like that. The theme of the show sort of came about organically in that when I put together the proposal, said, well, what do I have? I mean, I didn't say, well, I'm going to create this street less traveled um, show, but what I did is like, well, shoot, I've got a lot of these unusual street scenes. How do they all fit together? And came up with the theme as you described. And once I was accepted as a show, then I started creating a few more of those to fit into the exhibit that you'll be able to see.
All right, well, great. Let's move into some of the pieces that are currently on display here. So this is one of them, Allie. Would you like to talk a little bit about your process with painting watercolors and if you plan your paintings at all, or if it's more plein air and things like that?
I do some plein air. Mostly, I think all the ones that are in the show are from photos, and sometimes composite of multiple photos. Um, but and some of them are actually from failed plein air paintings. Meaning, I went to paint something and it either didn't come out very well, or I thought I could do better, or in one case, everything moved. I had it all planned out, had my easel out, was ready to go, took some photos for reference. started to paint, and then boom, it was all gone. The train moved, it just was.
Mhm.
So that one I then repainted back in the studio. In general, though, I'm taking photos. This one here that we're seeing is actually one of the first ones that I did of an alley. This is why I called this simply alley.
Mhm.
I had no uh, vision that, well, I'm going to keep painting alleys and back streets and whatnot. Um, and so, it was sort of an interesting process to, say, how do I create the feel of an alley, but still make it sort of welcoming or human. I mean, this is a street where the other side is storefronts. It's the main street. In the back, they have often apartments that are above the stores and things like that. So you've got the cars and you've got the stairs leading up to those. So as far as my process, yeah, I'm looking at photos or multiple photos. I'm doing thumbnail, little small sketches um, to figure out if that's going to work. I often will paint a small, like a 6x8 painting to see, okay, it's sometimes even hard with the thumbnail for me to totally visualize what it's going to look like. So you paint a small one and you see also, does the composition work? Do the colors work? I do like to do a lot of design and planning ahead of time. If you know anything about watercolor, sometimes it just does what it wants to do.
Mhm.
So you have to have, I think, a little bit more of planning an idea of what you're going to do before you get started, or who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. All right. This next one, business in the alley. Um, One question I have is, where are these locations? Are they places that you've traveled? Are they around your hometown and things like that? And when you go out to take photos, are you planning to go out and like take photos that you want to turn into paintings, or is it a little bit more organic? You see a scene and catch it quickly, sort of thing.
And the answer is both. I mean, I'll be just going out to see friends or going out for a walk, and suddenly you go like, oh, wait a minute, I've got to take a picture of that. And luckily we all have cameras on our phones now. uh, Not too long ago I had to go out and seek them because I had a real camera. I still do, but now I can capture things that I just run into. The first painting was from Stoughton, I believe, which is south of Madison. This scene is actually from a plein air event in Dubuque, um, that I did not end painting because it was so, the alley was so complicated. The people are superimposed on there, and part of the design and the planning is figuring out what to leave out and cropping, if you will. So my initial attempts at painting this went, you know, up another couple stories of the building, and uh, more wires and things, and I needed to zoom in the view to find an acceptable painting to me. So uh, that's so this is one that came from a failed attempt at plein air,
Hmm.
but both cropping it and, I say, adding some people into it instead of it just being this shadowed alley was what I think needed to make it work.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that I really have enjoyed seeing in your show so far is the mix of these somewhat further viewpoints and then the close-up detailed aspects of like the fire hydrants, which we'll see soon, and like the close-up of the bike, which I did include in this PowerPoint as well. So it's just nice to see a variety of close detailed and further viewpoints of these. So next one, Midwest Seasons Construction. Is there anything specific you would like to mention or say about this work?
This was also from a plein air event in Jefferson, Wisconsin. And we showed up on the first day. This is the main street, which is where a lot of people want to paint, and they go, oops, they just decided to tear up Main Street at the beginning of the festival. So and again, I didn't paint that there, but took some photos. I did turn in some construction photos for that plein air event. But this is yeah, one that was done later, and then move things around. That's the other thing, the advantage you get. It's easier to move things around when you have photos and say, oh, where should that cone be? Or you know, when you're doing plein air, it's harder to totally imagine and move stuff around.
Definitely. Yeah, it's fun seeing these construction scenes specifically. They aren't necessarily represented in specifically paintings and things often. So it's a nice different viewpoint of city life, things like that. So this is what one I was talking about before, some of the close-up, more detailed viewpoints of urban living. This one is called Unplugged. Is there anything about
Yeah,
this one you'd like to discuss?
sure. This is actually from Madison, and this is probably one of the, I sometimes call these, accidental still life, because they're, I didn't set out a table and put out the fruit and whatever, but behind this chain link fence was these old fire hydrants and pipes on a pallet there, wooden pallet, and I don't know what they were there for. I don't know if they were getting ready to throw them out or refurbishing or whatever, but I thought, gee, that's pretty darn interesting, at least to me. I'm going to paint that. So that's when I knew I had some different ideas of what makes a good painting. And there are ones like this that are sort of still life. There's construction things, there's ones that have the people, and like you say, or views down alleys.
Nice. Yeah, one thing I will mention that I've noticed since having your work up in the galleries is how nicely framed they are and things like that. And is there anything specific about your framing process that you would like to discuss? Because how they are displayed as well really make an impact on how they're perceived and read.
Right. So one thing different, there's watercolors, but none of them are behind glass. They're not matted and put behind glass. So that's the main thing. I still paint them on paper. I can show you some examples here if you want to zoom into me at some point. But basically, it's watercolor paper. It's attached to some kind of stiff archival board. And then it is varnished with 4 coats of a spray UV archival varnish. Then that allows me to put it right into a frame. And again, I sort of got into that when I started doing plein air, because imagine having to carry a bunch of glass and mats around, because plein air events, they almost always require that you have them framed at the before they're displayed to the public. And there's other artists that are doing this. So I said, well, I'm going to start doing that. And that's also the time when I upped my frame game, as it will. When you started to go in and you have, my Goodwill frames in there, and noticing the other artists are like, oh, they got really nice frames. So my frames are now a little bit more consistent and substantial, and that also helps pull the artwork together, having similar framing.
Yeah, and it's great looking at these. Sometimes when you look at watercolors behind glass, there's always a little bit of a glare. And with
Right.
these, there's no glare, and it's a great way to just really hone in on those details and not have anything separating you from the work itself. So it's fun to see.
Right.
And so That was the last piece. This is the piece I was also discussing earlier of this close-up image of a bike. But tomorrow night, so March 3rd, 2023, we will be having an artist reception and David will be there. So feel free to stop by, ask any questions, and see this work in person. And lastly, I was just wondering if there's anything specific you would like people to keep in mind when viewing your work in person.
Just come in, have fun, bring your friends. They are all for sale, by the way. The pump house gets a percentage, so you're supporting regional artists and you're supporting your local art facility. So
All right. Well, thank you. Let me see if I can figure out how to make you the main focus so that we can show an example of your artwork that in your framing process. All right. So now you're closer up. So
all
if you
right.
wouldn't mind showing some of those examples, that would be
There's
really
actually
interesting.
some behind me here that are framed or watercolors, whatever. But I was just say it's just normal watercolor paper that I'm using. And once it's painted, then I'm going to put it on a board like that. There's various kinds of boards, and now it can be just popped straight into a frame.
Great. And this archival spray, it doesn't impact the painting at all. It doesn't leave like a film or anything like that on the work.
Well, it's, there's a varnish thing there, but I think it actually in some ways makes the colors clearer, and partially because there is no glare or whatever, but it is an archival spray. Yeah, I think it looks good. Most people like it a lot unless you're into traditional watercolor framing, but yeah, there's other very nationally known watercolor artists that are now using this method. So I'm pretty comfortable that it doesn't create problems down the road.
Right. Well, great. Thank you for showing that a little bit more in detail, how you mat and frame your pieces. So thank you so much, David. And thank you for joining us. And we'll see you at the Artist Talk tomorrow night.
Yeah, sounds great.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
All right.